Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we'll explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who have found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. Amy, hi, I'm so excited to have you here with me. You are another of quite a few guests so far up to this point who are people that are kind of new to my circle, new friends as I consider you. You and I have just gotten to know each other over the past 1 year, roughly, I think.
That's what I was going to guess. Yeah, about a year.
Yeah. And I'm super excited to have you here, and I'll turn it over to you. Let's start with getting to know you, and then we'll get into the show. So, Amy, tell us a little bit about yourself. How would you like to be known, and what would you like folks to know about you?
Yeah, it's so funny because I am someone who has a lot of interests and a lot of hobbies. So how would I like to be known? I think today in this context, probably as a coach. I'm a professional coach with both the ICF, and I'm also a Gallup certified strengths coach. That's kind of become my brand. I'm also a human being with lots of other complex identities beyond that, and
Mhm.
lots of hobbies that may or may not come up as part of this conversation. But I think as a coach is probably how I'd like to be known today.
What would be some words that you might use to describe yourself? And it's not a test or a quiz. I do this with most of my guests because I really do appreciate exactly what you identified, which is we're humans. And so I just love hearing, what other kinds of words people use to describe themselves. What would be some adjectives you would describe yourself with?
So I would say creative and confident. I kind of want a third word that starts with a C, but the other word I was going to say, well, maybe I will. I'll say communicative.
Okay.
I'm also a driven person. That's kind of my go-to adjective when we do that as an activity. I have like a real high levels of intrinsic motivation that are always kind of driving me forward. But yeah, I think creative and confident are two words that I like to use to describe me, and I think have been there throughout my life.
And you pulled off the three C's. I don't
And I got the third. I know, I felt like I needed it.
what is it about us, that I do the same thing. It's like it's got to be three, and they've got to somewhat match. But you really leaned into the word driven, and not to add time to the episode, but it's part of you and your story. What does being driven mean to you before we jump into the episode today?
Yeah, I like to think of it as a positive that I always have something going on. And it's funny because it's going to play into this episode and this whole concept of comma. I'm not someone who stands still very often at all. I mean, the other side of this driven coin is you also could describe me accurately as restless. That's
Mm.
also me. Um, but I'm always kind of in motion. I always have something in the future that I'm thinking about. So I'm very future oriented. That's part of what driven means. I think I like, and I'm very fortunate that I've been able to work on things I'm passionate about. And so part of driven to me means like toward a mission. I'm driven toward something. It's not just, running directionless or aimless around. For me, the driven is toward a target. So I think it has that future focus. I think it has a high capacity for activity. I like to be busy all the time. So I think those are some of the elements that I would say are driven.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, and I love continuing to get to know you even deeper. Every conversation we have is always a little bit more. So this is what carrying the flashlight into yet another room in the house of Amy, so to speak.
I know. I feel like if that was the metaphor, if it was a house, there'd be so many rooms and each one would be so interestingly different. It's funny, like you're not one of the people that I would say like this, but oftentimes I meet people and I try to just really slowly unveil all the different things I do because I feel like there's a look they get on their face at some point of just like, that's a lot, or like this kind of overwhelm.
Mm,
So I think I've learned over the years to kind of slowly add detail and see how much people can handle of the things I've got going on.
mm.
But yeah, if it was a metaphor of a house, it would be a really big house with lots of different rooms that are all dedicated to really different activities.
Nice. I love that visual. And you and I will have to offline on this method or technique of slowly revealing things because that is not something I have learned in my life. And the that's a bit much or you're a bit much is a look that I get from people all the
Yeah.
time. So, oh,
There was a term a few years ago, people were using this word extra, and I
hmm.
kind of embraced it. It's like, yeah, I think I'm extra.
Mhm. Amy, as you think ahead to the conversation we're going to have on this episode today, what would be your intention for yourself?
So I actually don't spend a ton of time reflecting on the past. So I'm actually interested in this conversation to see what comes up or what I remember about like going back. And I'm going to tell a example of a time that's already happened. And so my intention is to
Hmm.
explore where that goes and to, even though I just said I'm driven, to not necessarily drive it in one direction or another, just kind of see what unfolds as I kind of go back and try and remember events that have passed. And my other intention is just to have fun. I like to talk. I like talking to you. So I think it'll be a fun next bit of time here together.
And I really appreciate this that you've shared. See what I remember, see what comes up. That's really cool in the telling of the story to kind of allow that to unfold and allow discovery to come from something that's already happened. So I'm really excited to be part of that with you. My
Yeah.
intention is, as always, to hold space for you to be able to explore as you've identified, and also that out there, someone who's listening to your story will hear a little bit of themselves in your story and connect with you in that way, and that it might bring a little bit of light to someone who might have been feeling a little bit alone or maybe feeling a little bit out there, and kind of brings them into this fold of humanity that we've both been talking about.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be lovely? I hope so.
Yes. All right. So, as always, we have 5 questions that frame the episode, and you and I haven't really talked about the story you're going to be sharing. So, I'm excited to hear what you have to share with us. So let's just jump in with the first question, and that is, Amy, where have you found yourself sitting on a comma in your life?
So this is where I was talking about this kind of restlessness. I started thinking about that, especially the word sitting. I was like, I don't know, I hardly ever sit down. So in my version of a comma, I've been standing on a comma
Mm,
and walking like it's a treadmill. Sometimes for me, it's hard to go back and find where the pause is because I don't stop moving during the pause. I was thinking about this idea of like, when you're a restless energy kind of person, I'm also probably described it like type A kind of personality. Like I always have stuff going on, always stuff going on. But the story I thought I would talk about is a time where I was moving and I was doing the things and, working and staying busy, but I wasn't going forward anymore. I didn't know where was I going to. So I'm on like a treadmill or a hamster wheel or a stationary bicycle or something. So for me, it's a little less like sitting on a comma. It's more like, wait a minute, I'm still putting out a lot of energy, but I don't know where I want that energy to go. And I don't feel like I can see beyond today.
mm,
And so for me, one of those times, or the time I thought I'd talk about, was right as I started to transition into the job I'm in now, and actually coaching. So this is a point in my life where I actually didn't know what coaching was on before this kind of comma was before I started moving off of this comma. And as I started to make some changes in my life, I finally could see, like the light in at the end of the tunnel, or like see that I was even in a pathway at all and kind of get off that stuck feeling of treadmill. So yeah, I think it was a time in my life right as I was transitioning into the job I'm in now, and also finding coaching not just as a career choice, but also how much it helped me in my own personal development.
mhm.
I told people as I went through my own coach training program, I was most excited about getting coached by other people. I mean, I wanted to learn about it, I guess, but mostly I was like, oh, this is great because I'm sure we practice on each other, which we did. I'm like, I'm going to get coached every day, by all different kinds of people. So that was kind of the time I was thinking about and reflecting back because it ended up being a springboard for all these wonderful things.
Mm.
If you fast forward, 5 years later.
Well, and I want to kind of reflect something that you shared. These are my words, so correct me if I misstate. But as you were describing I didn't even notice a pause. I was in movement. Couldn't see forward. I was on the treadmill. This phrase came up for me that stuck doesn't always mean still.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that piece. And what I'm really curious about is you've kind of laid the framework for us. This is what was happening in my life. These are some of the things that I was feeling. What was the stuckness? What was the comma? What were you actually stuck about, or whatever other word fits? What was going on at that point?
Yeah. So I was coming up on about 10 years of work in human resources, which is a great career. I think it's another one of those kind of like best kept secrets of like, I didn't even know
Mm,
what that was as a kid, and then I ended up there kind of by accident. And I liked the work I was doing okay. As I was learning it, I enjoyed it quite a lot. But then it became like I needed something new. Like I had learned, I think what I was going to learn from working in that field. And I hadn't thought much about it the entire 10 years because I had this amazing mentor who happened to also be my boss at the time, who I just really admired. And one of the reasons I liked my job was because he was an example to me. I've told him this before. I felt like I was taking a master's class in leadership working with him.
mm,
I just loved his style. I loved it. And he always had a vision for something. And often that vision helped me see my own future. And so all of those years, I was sort of, maybe I took it for granted, but I was just kind of seeing where did he think, what did he think I should be doing, and enjoying it as I went. And then he went and retired.
mm,
And and that was the first time that I kind of looked up and I thought, well, okay, if he's gone, uh, do I see this path for myself? How did I get here? One, am I enjoying this enough to keep going in this direction, or do I take all the lessons and all the gifts that I've got along the way and pivot here? And that's kind of a scary thing, right? And so meanwhile, I'm moving, and something else was happening. And this is something in my own story. I don't know if you've ever seen the musical Wicked,
mm-hmm,
but there's these, it's Wizard of Oz, and so there's the flying monkeys, and anyway, they have this kind of like this vault door that they open, kind of cranking open the door. And I've told people in the past, like me accessing memories in my own brain feels like that. Like you have to slowly crank open. It takes a lot of force. So as I slowly start to look back through the past, I often forget about this part, but I had broken out in a rash. And I went to the doctor, and it turned out they told me it was stress-induced eczema,
mm,
which I didn't know was a thing. And so I had to and it was painful. It's actually really painful. And so not only was I feeling really sad that my mentor was retiring, and I really did, I just loved working with him. I felt like my beacon for the future was gone. So now I had to make choices for myself. Not that I wasn't before, but it was like now it was all on me to figure
mm-hmm,
out where I was going. And there were clues that I didn't like the human resources work I was doing as much as I might have thought in the past. One being I was breaking out in a rash from stress from a project I was working on. So there were these kind of clues. And it was, I think, with his retirement, it also seemed like if I'm going to make a change, this is probably as good of time as any because things are already changing. There's a kind of thought about change management that sometimes people think, oh, well, since everything's changing, let's not add any more change. On the other hand, sometimes it's easier to change when everything's changing anyway.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So for me, it was a little bit of that. It's like, well, things are changing anyway. Maybe I have a chance now to ask for something new. And then I came up with the problem of what? What is it that I
Mm,
want? And that's where that
yeah.
comma
Well,
feeling comes in. It's like, I don't know. I don't know what I want.
well, and before I want to see where that goes too, but I want to kind of really acknowledge and reflect on some of the things that you said, because what I'm noticing in what you shared is that on the one hand, it's almost like this unfolding of awareness for you, because on the one hand, you described being, it sounds like somewhat comfortable in that line of work, really enjoying your mentor. It's not that you didn't make decisions for yourself, but there was something, some sort of a safety net there that created a safe space for you to make decisions. And there was always going to be someone to kind of sounding board off of or what have you.
Well, and part of my mission, as I saw it at that time, because I'm somebody who I really value certain relationships in my life, part of my mission was I wanted to support this leader. Like that was important to me. And so if
Mm,
there was something
mm.
that would make his job easier, or if I could support, like that was really fulfilling to me because I believed in what he was doing. So part of it was that. And that trap that, people fall in sometimes. I was also good at it. Like I was good at it. I got
Mhm, mhm.
recognition for it. People liked that I was in that role, by and large. I don't know, maybe someone listening to the podcast who knows me is like, I don't know what everyone thought, but most people, I think, it was working out. So sometimes there's that trap of like, well, I'm good at this. It's helping people.
Yeah,
So isn't that I'm being paid for it? I have, nice job security. I like where I work. And so is that enough? Like, should I dream bigger than that?
yeah. Well,
So I think all of that was going on.
that's the part that I kind of noticed as this unfolding is, on the one hand, as long as your mentor was there, things seemed okay. Once you were faced with this reality of your mentor retiring, then all of a sudden, I said all of a sudden, you start to notice the stress induced eczema and other things that are starting to reveal to you that now it really is time, whether that may have already been there or not. Like you said, kind of all the change started coming, and then it's okay, all the change, right?
Yeah.
It really seems like it was this path of awareness, because up until a certain point you were in it and that was what you focused on, and then once it started to change a little bit, then the vault did start to open, because then you started seeing a lot more.
Yeah. And it was like, sometimes you have like I had a lot of loyalty to this person too. Like as long as he was there, I wasn't gonna I wasn't gonna leave, right? And all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, this happens in life too, we have some of these like key kind of anchoring relationships in our life. And so when a key person, something happens to that relationship, like it disrupts the entire system, the entire network.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew, and I had lots of notice. I knew this was happening. I was preparing for it, but it was still very like disorienting. And yet, like now thinking back, I don't, I don't remember how I felt about at the time if I looked at it through this lens, but it's also there's a lot of opportunity in times like that as well. Like it
Mm-hmm.
opens up things and it changes. I said creativity was one of my words. Like I could create new things that I maybe hadn't thought about before. But yeah, yeah, everything you're saying, that's right.
Well, and you had just said, and now what?
Right.
So, well, let's kind of invite you to answer that question, or continue the story and answer this question at the same time, because the next question is, sitting on this comma, what did that create for you? So you decide, how you'd like to blend those two elements of your story together. But what did happen next?
Yeah. What did it create? A lot of fear
Mm,
and anxiety. I'm also a pretty highly anxious person, which people don't often pick up on because one of my favorite things to do is public speaking, which is what a lot of people are afraid of that. It's like I don't know, top three fear or something. So
hmm.
because I like that, I think people don't often think, oh, I'm also a highly anxious person, but I am. And so I was really I wasn't afraid that like I'd lose my job or something because I knew someone else would come in. I was afraid of who was going to be my new boss because that
Hmm.
relationship my entire life has always been like um, a key relationship for me. And everybody wants to have a good boss. I've been really lucky. I've had some amazing bosses, including my one right now, the person who came in next. But this time, I didn't know who this person was going to be, and I was really nervous. Like, what if I don't like this person? What if I'm going to have to make a big dramatic change? And so, else did it open up? Um, Actually, it opened up. So when my mentor boss left, it opened up actually a lot of time. And as much as
Mm,
I really loved working with him, it also was a lot of projects I was always doing. And, in that kind of in between, when I didn't quite have a new supervisor, the projects kind of slowed down. So it was just back to like, what's the necessity kinds of things, because there wasn't a new vision and there wasn't a new charge. And so it opened up some time. And what I did with that time, to answer your other part of your question, I just started taking like as many training classes, as many opportunities to just learn things and kind of meet people outside of my area. Because the other thing about human resources, which depends, I guess, what part of human resources people work in, but it can generally be a behind the scenes kind of job.
mhm,
So I
mhm.
wasn't working, I wasn't out interacting with a lot of people. And so I started taking these training classes. I started getting certified and stuff. It was really funny because someone could look now at my LinkedIn or my resume or whatever and think I planned that all out. Like I just because I started to find a common thread, but really it was just anything interesting and new. I was up for it, and I wasn't really sure where it would lead, but I was particularly interested in offerings that would help me learn more about myself. Hence why coaching was so appealing. Uh,
Yeah, I'd love to step
yeah.
in on that for just a second, because when you said, okay, it created time, and so I started taking all kinds of classes, the question that comes up for me is, what prompted you to go that route? I think you're about to answer the question. Actually, I could have left this alone, because you said I focused on classes where I would learn more about me. But what sent you down the path of, I'm going to use this downtime, my word, not yours, but I'm going to use this time to actually take classes and learn and develop skills and so forth. Why that path?
I think for me, it's probably, I have a two-part answer. One is, I mentioned before, I'm a restless person. I don't like a lot of downtime. Like, so I had to fill it with something. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, and I'm not advising people like just fill all your waking hours with something to do. But that's why I did it, because I like to be busy. And the other is, which I haven't mentioned yet, but I work in higher ed. And so I work in a learning environment. I mean, I consider myself a lifelong learner as well, but part of working in higher ed, at least where I work, is we have access to lots of learning that's embedded in our organization. We have our own learning and development that has all these classes and programs. And so I think part of it probably was just I'm
Mhm.
in the industry, like our business is learning. So it's always on my mind, and I'm surrounded by resources. So I think probably, yeah, my restlessness and looking at what's the easiest thing to do. Oh, work is doing another class. Maybe I should go to one. It's been several years since I've actually signed up.
I think that's an important distinction to call out. Is it was there, it was kind of the water you were swimming in. Some people would say, well, it takes a lot of effort to go and sign up for a class and so forth. And
And will their work
it
support it? Mine is very supportive of that.
yeah, yeah, but I think the point is that I kind of wanted to call attention to is you were able to take advantage of an option or a course of options that was right in front of you. In
Hmm.
this case, it was classes. In this case, they were accessible and easy to get into. But if somebody's sitting in a different environment and sitting on a similar comma as yours, you don't have to do what Amy did and go find classes. What is an option, or what are some pathways that are actually already under your feet? So
Yeah.
so it's kind of cool. I mean, obviously I'm biased. I come from kind of a learning world too. So I was like, yay, classes and so forth. But also I want to call attention to what you said, which is, and that was relatively easy for me because of where I was.
Yeah,
So
and many of them were either no cost to me or supplemented because of where I work. So,
mhm.
yeah, I think maybe the transferable takeaway might be what resources might be sitting right in front of you that you maybe haven't taken advantage of or did, but it's been a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I've been with my employer for 16 years. And so I think when I was new, I took a bunch of classes, and then you just kind of, if it is the water you're swimming in, to your metaphor, it's like you kind of tune it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not a big deal. You're like you're around it all the time. It's like you could always access it, but I hadn't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was kind of re remembering and reconnecting with resources that were always available to me, but it wasn't on my radar, or it just, I kind of had pushed it aside.
New sense of purpose now too,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
That's a perfect segue into the third question, because the next one is, what did you learn about yourself?
So many things. Um, I learned so many things. Um, so my first big takeaway class was this was the time in my life where I got to take the Strengths Finder Clifton Strengths Assessment for the first time. And hopefully not, that's okay to say the name of it. I'm not necessarily advertising it, but for me, it's a personality assessment, and it tells you things that might be true about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always loved assessments. I love quizzes. I love even just memes about that might be about me
Mm-hmm.
on Instagram. Um, and this assessment it was the closest any assessment had ever gotten to like who I am, who I think I am. And that moment for me reading that it was this spark that then I started really following that down. So what did I learn? Well, I would have said I learned it. I'm even saying that now, but really it was more about remembering. Actually, this whole journey was about remembering. Sometimes people, me, can be so driven to move that we get off of a track, or we forget like who we were when it started, because you kind of follow a pathway somewhere, and it may not even be bad, but it just might not be totally authentic to you. And I'm not someone who likes to think about regret, or I don't live my life with many regrets, but I take those as learning. So what did I learn about myself? I learned or remembered, which is so funny because I have my undergraduate degree is in
Mm-hmm.
acting. So this wasn't new, but I had forgotten somehow, or at least I had said that's not important right now because I'm doing professional life or something. I like to be in front of an audience. I like to be out in front of people.
Mm.
That's what my report says all over it. My Clifton Strengths report. It's like you like an audience. Literally those words. I'm like, yes, I do. And here I am sitting in an office on a computer with no audience, like in a secret room doing secret HR things. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so one of the things that was really big was I also love um, at, at first I thought it was teaching. I've kind of moved on from that a little bit. And I think what I really like doing is I like facilitating transformational experiences for groups of
Mm.
people who will continue to know each other beyond that one day of training. And I like to be there and create experiences and spaces for people to change their perspective, deepen their awareness, all that. But at the time, I described that all as teaching. I like teaching. And so I thought, I need to find something to teach. So my two biggest takeaways at that time that I learned or relearned or remembered were I need to get back out in front of people. That's when I'm happiest. That's how I think I contribute best. And so what did I do? It was, when you have like an intention and then all of a sudden the universe, or whatever term people like to use, starts like just lining up to make it happen. As soon as I
Mm-hmm.
set that intention, it was there was happened to be a certification course in that exact assessment coming to my town. And there was like one space left or something. And I got in just right in time. And so fast forward, I actually teach that assessment now, which is so funny because it's the assessment that helped me remember that that's when I'm the most passionate. That's when I'm the most excited. And so,
Well, and
yeah.
if I may, I want to call attention to that, because I think that's such an important takeaway and a call out. And I appreciate you pointing that out and playing with the distinction with the words there, because it's not so much that you didn't learn things along the way, but what you're really pointing out for us is that through the process of learning, it reminded you of an original path, original passions, original preferences that you had just, quite frankly, forgotten, gotten off track on, as you said, right?
They weren't in my job description,
Yeah.
whatever the reason.
Yeah. So it's not that you went out and learned a new skill. And all of these paths are valid, right? But for you, it was you went out seeking something and you found something that was deeper and more uniquely you, but that had already been there before too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I went out walking and something just turned me around and there's a mirror and I'm like, oh, I already had it. I'll literally go back now because I keep journals, but I rarely ever go back and read them or look at them. But every once in a while, if I'm like cleaning out an office or something, and I flipped open some note I took, like 10 years ago, and it's like the answer was always staring me right in the face, but I didn't see it the same way as I see it now. So yeah, that
Yeah.
was what my path was really about, remembering who at my core I am, what I like to do, and feeling the courage to be more of that person. I think there's lots of reasons that people might, or even how I started this call. I'm like, sometimes I'm a little extra, so I try to calm down. Um, how do I be more of my authentic self? How do I connect to that person? And then what I now say is my purpose is to belong to myself, to be my authentic self, and to help other people do that same thing. Because I think by standing in our own strengths, we can help other people like feel like they have permission to do that too. And actually, nobody has to give you permission to do that.
What comes up for me is remembering who you were and how you described, like, I like being in front of people. And there's not necessarily a job description for that. There are lots of jobs that have job descriptions that is suited for, but you didn't just go out and it's like, okay, I'm going to change jobs and do this. It was like, this is the thing. This is the what, the why, and even a little bit of the how. And then you were able to kind of translate that into something different. You haven't really described that for us, and I think that'll probably come up next. But you didn't go out looking for the next job necessarily. You weren't even seeking a job. You didn't say. But what you discovered wasn't just some job. It was something that's uniquely you, and then it influenced where you went next.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something else that was happening around this time. And it was that there was another person in a leadership position at my work. And they had asked me to put together a list of things I would like to work on. And it seems like in some ways it's like, oh yeah, of course, we should all be doing that, right? But how many times does a leader in a workplace come up and say, what would you like to work on? So I was also given this opportunity. I now know in Strengths Land that I lead with influencing themes. And I right away there was something in my brain that's like, you can't throw away this opportunity. Like you need to really think about this because someone's asking you, you have a chance to show it to someone at a level who could actually make that happen. And that was, it's funny because that's what coaching is all about, right? It's like getting us to like figure out what is the outcome we want. But I hadn't really done that. I think I was also making a transition in my life at that point from being fulfilling tasks that were assigned to me into more of a, now I'm coming up with the things we're doing. Like I'm designing the projects and more of a leadership role myself. So that was really, it may seem like a small thing, but I remember it. I remember spending hours on this list of thinking, what do I ask for? Someone's letting me ask. And I didn't know what the answer would be, but I felt like it was important for me to come up with something because I don't want that to pass me by.
What was important about that to you? For you to spend that much time and effort and focus on it, what was happening for you there?
I think you mentioned before I really wasn't looking for other jobs, but I would have said I would have been open to it because my tether was gone. So I could have been like, nowadays, like, people are always trying to recruit people from other places. Like I would have been maybe a flight risk
Mm,
because I didn't really know and I was open to different things. But I think deep down, like I didn't want to have to leave. Like I wanted to stay. And maybe this list was a glimmer of, hey, maybe I can stay here and do whatever it is I want to do if I can just figure that out in time to get it on this list. Like this list is
hmm.
my ticket to liking my job more. And I'm really a big proponent of like the whole work I do in workforce development and coaching. I'm primarily an internal coach, is we spend so much of our lives at work, most of us. And if we can make that even like 10% more enjoyable, like it's it really has a profound impact on people and their lives. And so here was a chance for me, not like and again, I didn't like I wasn't burnt out, I wouldn't say. I didn't like really extremely dislike the work. I wanted something more. And here was the like a ticket to, okay, well, what is
Hmm.
it? What more do you want? And the fact that it
Yeah.
was coming from someone who actually could approve it, could make that happen. That was the other key thing. It meant not only is it an activity, like making a wish list, but it's possible.
A little bit of a checkbook analogy in there, right? Like this isn't just somebody's asking me and they've got a checkbook in their
Yeah.
hand, so to speak. It's kind of an old metaphor,
Yeah.
but colorful, right?
Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
I get what you mean. Yeah. It's the person who can actually like, yeah, who has the code to
Yeah.
sign
Well, and there's
off.
got to be
Yeah.
something powerful about that person of influence and position of power asking.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something more too about that possibility in there. Amy, what's changed for you as a result of sitting on this comma? I think you've kind of already described a little bit, but what would you add to that question?
Well, my entire job ended up changing
Mm,
completely. And now I'm working in my dream job. It's like I got to write it. And so it's exactly what I wanted to do. What has changed because of that? I'm happier, I would say, overall.
mhm,
I get to see the impact of my work more directly than I did in my other job, which is really important to me. I think about people I've gotten to coach or teach or whatever workshop I'm running, and I think about kind of the ripple effect from that, and that really is fulfilling to me. So I feel like my work is more meaningful to me.
mm,
Um, I also think I'm not as afraid of pausing as I used to be. I think it's implied that sitting on a comma isn't what you want to do, right? Or you don't want to be there too long, or you don't want to be there forever, or whatever.
mhm,
And I think at the time, like I said, the first thing I felt was fear. Like I can't stop because I don't want to get stuck here. Or I don't want to, but I think what's changed for me is, and part of it's because of coaching, and it's really helped me to challenge any way I think or believe about anything and say, like, is that actually true? What you what you believe?
mhm.
Like the Byron Katie,
Yeah.
is it true? Is it really true? What would happen if you didn't have that thought? I think there's a fourth question I can't think of right now, but I'm not as afraid of pausing as I used to be. And I think that's good because it's part of life, right? Like, and it's healthy. And sometimes I think, what if I hadn't? What if I had just kept plugging along? I'd probably answer that I was fine and that life was fine, but I wouldn't have known all of them. Well, maybe this is the right word. I thought it maybe sounds a little dramatic. The magic, the magic
Mm,
that happened next.
mm,
So I think if I have another pause kind of moment, which again for me is more like standing and moving at a fast speed, trying to pretend I'm not in a pause, I don't think I'd be as afraid of it because I'm grateful. I'm really grateful for it. Yeah, now I can't think, what if that hadn't happened? Well, I guess I wouldn't know. But I think what's different for me is I look at my own career trajectory differently. I found a type of work that I really love and hope that keeps being true for years to come. And I've met some really cool people, like including you, Paul Briley. Coaches are cool people. And I think of all the people in my life who I didn't know, if I think about like before the pause and then to now, there's so many great things that have happened and people that I are now, some of my closest friends I've just met in the last few years.
Well, and I love the attention that you call to essentially, sitting on a comma or being on pause is a neutral thing, right? There's a lot of beliefs that are packed into it because often people come to this is what I've learned from just my own experience being a coach, talking to people on this podcast. When we come to that point, it's not necessarily always intentional on our part. And then all these beliefs come into it. You yourself described your own experience with it. But as we go through the process, then it unfolds and we can see and take from it so many different things, right? And so you even in your own story here, you've talked about finding yourself at this place, feeling certain ways about it. And now here you are full circle. Hey, what if it hadn't happened? And look at all the things that did happen as a result of it. So it's a gleaning process in a way. It's very much can be very developmental for us if we allow it to be.
And for me, one thing I'll add is, so in the middle of all this, I ended up going back to school and getting a master's degree, which, on itself is, that's a cool thing to do, or can feel like an accomplishment, and it is, and all that. But
of course it is. Yeah.
For me, it was something on top of that, it was something I always thought I would do. And years ago, I didn't pursue it because I didn't know what I wanted to study. And for years, it's just been in the back of my mind. Like, I really would like to do that, but what is it I want to do? Like, what do I want to make my career? And I didn't know. And then as soon as this pause happened, I did the reflection. I started taking classes, meeting new people, getting out of my own comfort zone, comfort cave. And all of a sudden, it was all so clear. And so just in these last few years, all that was happening. Plus, I found a program, enrolled in school, finished my degree. And it was like all those years, it was something I wanted, but I didn't have the clarity. And so something about that pause gave me so much clarity that then if I'm like, I don't know, evening out the speed of things, of which things happen, everything that happened after that point seems like it's on fast forward, like accelerated.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes there's that kind of rest that's necessary so that you can have the energy for the next leg of the journey. Because once I reactivated, it was very kind of fast and furious. Like, as soon as I found what it is I want to do, I was like, oh, yes. And in coaching, I tell people, too, or we've talked about this with other coaches, is often the hardest thing is figuring out what it is you want. And once you figure that out, oftentimes people realize it's not as difficult as they thought to make it happen. So for me, that was the case. It took a little while to figure out what was I going to do next. But as soon as the clues started coming and those sparks started happening, it was pretty rapid fire from then until now. And lots of big things and big decisions that were easier for me to make the big decisions after the pause because I had a new clarity that I hadn't had before.
And it also brings up the concept of sometimes it's just not as complicated as we are making it.
Yeah.
I'll keep it brief, but I had a similar experience. I had always known as a young person that I was going to get my college degrees because I was going to be the only person in my family who did. Well, I ended up getting into a job that had me traveling full time. And it was like, I already have this career that I was going to be going to college to get. So I put college on pause. I got about halfway through a bachelor's degree. And then just had this amazing, career that opportunities didn't, evade me. And that's a whole other episode. We can unpack why that might be. But not having the degree didn't really cost me anything in my career. And then I tried again. I was at a VP level in a company and I tried again because it was going to be local and I wasn't traveling as much and things didn't line up and so forth. It's like, okay, well, I've waited this long. And then when I was no longer in a corporate job, no longer looking for a job where typically I'm doing air quotes, a degree would be the ticket to entry. And then COVID happened is when like, I guess I'm going to go ahead and finish that degree. And the thing is, it was not that complicated then, to your point, because I was only doing it for me, which meant I didn't have to worry about where I went and how I went and what I took. I did it for me, my purposes, my reasons, my cost, my time, my institution. And it just slid by. I finished that bachelor's degree in 11 months and added a master's and did that in 3 months.
Oh my goodness. Amazing.
But the point that I want to reinforce what you've shared is that all those years, I kept thinking a certain way about myself because I didn't have those degrees. But by the time I was ready to get the degrees, they only mattered for a very small and specific reason anymore. It just wasn't that complicated. It's funny how things will unfold.
Yeah, and we could go into a whole nother thing about degrees. And like I always want to be careful too, because I live in the world of higher ed. I love certifications. I love degrees, but certainly that is not, that is not a measure of, your own intrinsic or your own self-value. And for me, it was important because it was a goal I always wanted to achieve. And there's lots of pathways. And when you said that, it resonated with me too, because my master's degree is in leadership. And which later I was like, of course, like it was always about leadership. Even the story I told you about my mentor, I was always interested in leadership. But I had the job that you probably would go to get that degree to get. And so going into it, I was like, I already have the job. Now I'm just I want to have this experience for me because it's something I've always wanted to do. I like school. I've always liked school. And so whatever those reasons are, but I think kind of like earlier, how we did the transferable thing, of course, I'm a proponent of education. That's my industry. That's like, it's a big part of my life, but it's not everybody's path. But maybe there's something that, again, it's that remembering. What is it that was important to you? Is it still important? Maybe it's easier to do it than you thought. That's what I found. It's like,
or easier now, right?
Right, maybe. Exactly.
And I mean, another direction we could go is maybe we forget things for a reason because the timing isn't right. Yeah. You just never know, right?
Yeah, I know that could be a whole nother call.
Yeah, right. I know. Awesome. Okay,
things to talk about.
Do a whole separate podcast. It's like Paul and Amy talking, our musings. Let's start to bring things to a close. Last question, and I think you've really already revealed some of this to us a little bit, but I want to ask it. So, what does getting off a comma look like to you, or for you?
I think it's clarity, because I think there's a difference between being on a comma. For me, again, I'm defining that as like where I don't know what's next versus just going slow. You don't have to be moving fast to be like, you can be off a comma and also moving slowly through something. For me, off the comma means I can see a little bit about where I'm going. I have intentionality. I have a goal, maybe. Or even at minimum, like I'm a very future oriented person. So I'm usually thinking like several years out. But I think even in its basic form, off a comma for me means when something's in front of my face, I know if it's for me or not. Like I have some of that haze is gone. I think part of the comma for me is like, I don't even know. Like, I don't even know anymore. What is it, that I want, or where am I going, or what am I doing? I think for me, that's the comma feeling is kind of lacking a direction or feeling like it. And once you're off the comma, even if you're going fast or slow, or you're doing 100 classes or none, it's having that hope in your mind of like, there's something I'm working toward, even if that thing changes. Because I think we walk, sometimes we run. But knowing that there's something for us in the future, that's the kind of off the comma feeling.
It's this knowing piece, right? And it's a spectrum. Sometimes we know and we're clear and we're headed and we've got a plan. And on the other end of the spectrum, sometimes there's just kind of like this little nudge of knowing that it's not entirely sure where it's all going, but this is definitely the step to take or the direction that I'm going, right? And so I really appreciate that reflection on your part. about the knowing if it's me, if it's for me or not. Amy, what would you acknowledge yourself for, having now kind of completed the storytelling part of the podcast?
Well, I did have fun. That was one of my intentions. And I started with the story of, kind of my job change, but I also, just kind of stayed in the moment and kind of went along with it. I also really, well, I'll acknowledge you for it. I like the moments where you called out about what are some things that could be transferable, or somebody else, it might be a different example.
Mm,
And actually, that's even meaningful for me too, to kind of take it back into a broader sense. If it wasn't about this one specific thing I did, it's what that meant and what that represented. Um,
mm.
I also will acknowledge, because it is hard for me sometimes to remember things that happened, that I think I got most of the big key points. So good job on that.
Nice, nice. I really love how you leaned into remembering in your story, because it's such a really rich pathway to explore, and so that's going to be a really cool kind of thing for me to bring into my journal prompts and some of my reflections and so forth as well. So, Amy, tell us, how can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and I know you have show notes that'll say, but it's just, if you search my name on LinkedIn. And then I also have an Instagram page. So I post some quotes and things there, and sometimes I do little videos. My Instagram is at Shuman Coaching. And those are probably the two best ways. And if someone wanted to message me through either of those, I respond to messages in both of those platforms as well.
Okay, nice. And then, like I do with every guest, because I believe firmly that it's an important part of everybody's story, is who do you support? Who do you want to give voices to? So, who would you like to acknowledge and maybe lift up or promote or give a little extra boost to, that might not otherwise get all the publicity that they deserve? And that could be individuals, creators, organizations, or causes.
Yeah. So the main organizations that I like to support, and I like to support a lot of organizations, but I really love performing arts, especially performing arts for children. I mentioned earlier I think my undergraduate degree is in acting. Theater did a lot for me to say confidence is one of my top three words. And so I believe in the power the arts education has for children. So I'm in Yolo County. I like to donate to theaters here in my local area, but I would probably plug donating to any local theaters. Theaters also really took a really hard hit during the pandemic. They were one industry that couldn't operate at all because of regulations and things. So they are really trying to find their way back. And that's supporting live theater is one of my big ones, or just buy a ticket to go see a show. That's another way you can support live theater. The other one is NAMI, or NAMI, NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. Allegiance Alliance. Anyway, they have chapters in different cities. There's one in Yolo County where I'm located, and also there's a national. I had a friend who has passed away, and he used to be very active in that group. And I believe in the support that they give. I think in coaching, also, I think a lot of us coaches have a lot of heartstrings pulled into the mental health space,
Mhm.
and they're just a really great organization. So you can donate to them nationally, or they have local chapters as well.
Right. And then you also had referenced the YOLO Food Bank and Clifton Strengths.
Oh yeah, so I like food bank is always good. We have one here in Yolo County. I'm just coming out of an appointment with ICF, the International Coach Federation. There's so many great nonprofits out there. I tend to like donating locally, so that would be my suggestion, is people, donate to the people right in your city. But yeah, YOLO Food Bank is another great organization, and hunger and food insecurity are really important issues. We, I think in coaching, we talk also about needs. Like there's some basic human needs that have to be met first before we get into all this stuff we're
Mhm.
talking about today. Like what would be my dream job? And like there are people who don't have enough to eat, and that's a level
Mhm.
one basic survival need. And so organizations that support that also are really I just have a lot of respect and admiration for people doing that work. And so that's another great place to donate.
Well, Amy, thank you for these acknowledgments, for sharing your story, and for really everything that you've allowed us to be a part of today. So I'm looking forward to you and I having more conversations. And just again, thank you for helping us see a little bit into your experience.
Thanks, Paul. This was really a blast, and thanks for having me.
What an honor it is to witness these stories from these amazing human beings, and today's guest was no exception. I invite you to think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. I can't tell you how magical it can be to set aside your expectations and just let your thoughts flow out of your head and onto paper. You don't have to have an agenda. You don't have to do anything with it, but you can be amazed at what comes out of your thoughts and onto paper and what that can do for you. I know freestyle journaling has been a powerful practice in my life for a very long time. You just never know what you might discover about yourself. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. Follow me on social media at Off the Comma, and also look for upcoming workshops and events at offthecomma.com, or better yet, go to offthecomma.com and sign up for my mailing list and let me bring the news directly to you. I am passionate about keeping this podcast ad-free so that we create a safe container for people to be able to tell their stories uninterrupted by commercials and promotions. I currently cover all the production costs, and I'm happy to continue doing so. And I'm also open to and appreciative of any donations that anyone would like to contribute. This is nothing more than to be able to support the podcast and cover some of the monthly editing and producing and equipment costs that are associated with this podcast. So look for the donations link in the podcast descriptions wherever you find this podcast. Be sure to like this episode, follow the podcast, and more importantly, spread the good word. If you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. As always, keep noticing.